So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to just ask Pat a few questions to kick things off, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. I will repeat your questions because otherwise it won't go out over the microphone. You probably see it like this. It won't go out over the internet to people who are joining us online. Which, hi guys. And then Pat, just answer whatever you want. So, okay, let's start with this. Your faith is very important to you. It's how we first even had the context for this connection. Would you just share how that happened? What's your testimony?
Yeah. So I was born in Pennsylvania in a very rural community. I was baptized at 6 days old with full knowledge of what I was doing. And as I, grew up in the United Church of Christ, so if you would have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said yes, right? And there were two good reasons to go to church, right? One is not to get in trouble with dad and my uncles, right? And the other one was to meet girls and impress their mothers, right? So, that's why you go to church, right? So I always thought I was a Christian. I moved to California, and what did I do after moving to California as an 18-year-old kid? I went to church, right, to meet girls. And sure enough, I met Linda, and she became my wife. But that's another story. And very soon, the environment of the Christian church, it was like, okay, am I really a Christian? And the sermon title, February 17th of 1980. was based on Revelation 3:15 and 16. I know your deeds, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one or the other. But since you're neither cold nor hot, but lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. And that was a very convicting service to me that day. And I was baptized that night, and I said I was going to be hot for God. And that began my full-time Christian journey, right, as being a Christian in this small church in Santa Clara. And then sort of the next major chapter, right? So I'm now a baby Christian. And then two miracles happened very shortly thereafter. One is I had two roommates at the time. One was Bob and one was Jack. Bob's favorite things mostly centered around building bombs with spare parts from the local, surplus store. And Jack's favorite things mostly centered around the bong in the center of the room. Right. So they were very spiritual.
Bongs and bombs.
Yeah. Bombs and bombs, Bob and Jack. So another Bob comes up to me at Intel, right, as a young technician at Intel. And he comes up to me and he says, "You're Pat." And I said, "Yes, God spoke to me about you." Right. God speaking to you about me. And he said, he told me we're supposed to be roommates. And Bob was a super spiritual guy, sort of lifted me out of that cesspool of bombs and bongs. Right. And then about 2 months after that, I felt called to go into full-time ministry. Right. And, hey, I was loving tech. I'm going to Santa Clara for my undergrad, computer architecture. I am excelling at this technology stuff. And it's like, God, I don't want to go into ministry. And when you argue with God, you usually lose. Right. So I argued with God for several months, and finally it's like, okay, God, I give up. If this happens, and I laid a fleece like Gideon before God, and I said, if this happens, I will go into full-time ministry. And as soon as I laid the fleece before God, the answer was, the workplace is your ministry. Right? And that became, my life verse became Colossians 3, 22 and 23, work heartily as for the Lord, knowing it is the Lord Christ whom you serve. Right. And that just became my, passion then, was to be a workplace minister. So often when I'm speaking, I'll say, how many of you are Christians? A lot of hands will go up. And then I'll say, how many of you are full-time ministers? A few hands will go up. And then I'll say, how many of you are Christians? A lot of hands will go up. And then I'll say, let's try this again. How many of you are full-time ministers? Because if you are called to Christ, you are called to full-time ministry. In the home place, in the workplace, in the school place, in the marketplace. So, welcome to full-time ministry, just like that. And that's a little bit of my story, right, of how I came to Christ and how I've become, seen as this very visible Christian CEO and business leader.
Very cool. Thank you. So that was when you were 18, 20. Now you're not. And so your faith has no doubt developed and matured since then. If you get in a time machine, because you got a room full of 20-somethings here, college students, undergrads, grad students, a couple of alumni came back. Don't think I don't see you out there. If you get a time machine and go back to young Pat, what What advice would you give to him? What do you wish you had known about faith and life and work back then?
Yeah, and you make a lot of mistakes along the way. And by the way, when you make those mistakes, they also become the character shaping things that make you who you are, right? So in many regards, I'm glad I don't get the opportunity to go back and unmake some of those mistakes on the way. But one of them was, I had become known a little bit as the workplace minister poster boy, right? There was an article about faith in the workplace in the New York Times. I was featured. There was one in the Washington Post. I was featured. There was one in Wall Street Journal. I was featured. And the HR department at Intel hated this. It wasn't a little bit, it was like, and then, I had a meeting with the Pope, right? And super cool. And, it was all over the Intel internal circuit things and so on. That made it even worse, right? It's not the poster boy, articles being written and so on like this. And through a variety of things, I had made a few mistakes and other stuff like that. I was asked to shut up about my faith. Yeah, just to take a muzzle for this. And remember what I had said, be a full-time workplace minister. And, I'm in a meeting with the head of HR, the CEO of the company, being asked to muzzle.
And what level are you at the company at this time?
I'm a VP.
Okay.
So, I'm no longer a dweeb, right? But I'm way more junior than, so in that, right, it was progressing in my career and I had made some mistakes and here I am in this meeting. And I can just remember everything about this meeting, the conference room, the CEO was sitting there, the head of HR was sitting there. I was here, the super uncomfortable meeting, and I knew that I had committed to God to be a workplace minister, and I was being asked to shut up. And what did I do? I agreed to muzzle. And the second I said it, that I agreed, I knew I was wrong. Right? And I had the most miserable spiritual 13, 14 months after that of my entire life. Right, for it because I'd made a commitment to God, and because of these mistakes and being asked, you're fearful of your own career and all of these other emotions that you're going through. I agreed to not do what I had committed to God, and it was a dreadful spiritual year. My prayers did not make it off the first floor, right, and just living in a spiritual fog for a year. About 13 months later, I come back to the CEO, and I told him, I lived up to all of my commitments. And I asked for the muzzle to be lifted, and he agreed. And literally that very day, I had a dinner with a guy who wanted to mentor, with me. I witnessed to him, and I ended up baptizing him as well as all 5 of his children. Wow. Right. And I had the coolest thing happen this last summer. One of those kids asked me to be the officiant at their wedding. So, and which is just like the coolest thing that you possibly do. So, my wife became the matchmaker for Andrew. I became the officiant for Madeline, right? Maddie, this other friend. So it was like the coolest year possible. So, in that way. So the advice that I would give you is, be true to your faith, right? And I realize now as I look back on that moment, I do not, and again, I was being, it was a written warning going to go in my file and all these kind of things. I mean, it's such, real pressure, to back off. I stole God of a miracle. And I don't know what would have happened, right? But I was no longer true to the commitment that I had made to my God and to myself, right? So my advice to all of you would be true to your commitments. And, in that, you don't know how it's going to work out. But you know that if you back off of who you are, you're not living in integrity, it will have consequences. And that was very painful. That was a really, really tough couple of years, for me. So, make your commitments, choose your pathway, glorify your God, and don't back off of those, even if the situation may just feel uncomfortable, untenable, right? You don't know how it's going to work out. Don't steal God from that miracle.
Wow, thank you. So you went on from being that VP to eventually you became the CEO of Intel. First, you were the CEO of VMware. Then you were the CEO of Intel. Now, you don't achieve those heights without ambition. The faith, though, that you're talking about is renowned for emphasizing humility. How do you square ambition and humility?
Well, so how many of you, do any of you have ambition? Okay. Who put that ambition there? God, right? Any of you creative? Okay, now there are a few. Okay, yeah, are you? Okay, anyway, like that. Who put that creativity there? God. Any of you passionate? Who put that passion there? Okay, and what does God want you to do with the things that he put inside of you? Use them to excellence. So, hey, you have career ambition, right? The only thing that God demands of you is excellence for the skills that he has given you, right? And with that, you shouldn't be embarrassed to, pursue achievement, pursue impacts, pursue influence. Who are some of the biblical role models? Okay, David, what did he become? The most powerful king of Israel of his entire day, right? Another one, Daniel. Daniel rose to be the second most powerful person of 3 different pagan kings, right? That's like, right, being Republicans, Democrats, and the EU president, right? Or something like that. It's like, man, this was an accomplished guy, right? And, Daniel in particular, if you pick one role model in the Bible, right, as a business leader, Daniel's it. There's never a sin listed for Daniel, right? The highest recognition of integrity of any person, and what was the only thing they could find bad about him, right? Was when he was tricked into honoring his God. And again, so ambition isn't a bad thing, right? Are you going to do it with integrity? Are you going to do it in God-honoring ways? Are you going to do it with relationships? What is the ultimate currency when you get to heaven? How many lives you've touched for eternity? Only thing that matters. And in that ambition, how many lives are you going to touch for eternity? There you go for it. How are you going to use that platform of leadership, of success that you have, right? And if you use it well, that is God honoring, right? If you become filled with yourself in arrogance, and pomp, right? And that becomes the only driving, thing of your life. Okay, then you've misused the passion, the skills, right? Innovation, the capabilities that God has given you, right? When you show up at work, what is the most important thing that you get to do to witness in the workplace? Okay, a little bit of a quiz question. Be a great employee. Because if you are not a great employee, you have no witness, right? God calls us to excellence when we're in the workplace. Be the best. And because you're God-empowered, spirit-fueled, it's like you got an extra superpower when you show up in the workplace. Use it to the full ability, right? Be influential, right? Touch as many lives as possible, right? And make money along the way. And then we're going to talk about that a little bit, I'm sure, as well. So
we will. Before I get to money, though, so this was very good. So talk to me more about how humility fits into that. So is it just that you're not focused on yourself, you're focused on something bigger than yourself, or does it affect the way you interact?
Yeah. And, clearly, older Pat and younger Pat, I had one guy younger in his career. He said, I will not work for Pat. Right. And it was sort of like, the interviewee who invited me out to Intel, he said, smart, aggressive, arrogant. He'll fit right in. All of us go through a character journey.
Y'all didn't laugh. Is that because that's what your Stanford application profile?
Anyway, more people laugh about it.
I thought it was good.
Yeah, I thought it was, yeah, I did too, but oh well.
But we brought our own encouragement. We don't need yours.
Yeah. But, clearly, how do you demonstrate Christ's character, right, on the journey, right? In some ways, it's like, being a person that people want to follow. How do you show, true love and affection? One of my, favorite things in the workplace is, may I pray for you, right? I'm not asking you to pray with me. I'm not asking you to believe in my God. May I pray for you, right? Wow, what a disarming thing to say to people. I want to bring your needs in front of my God in the most intimate way possible, right? Wow, that's humbling, right? Also being ready to explain mistakes. I had one instance. I apologized to all 30 to 33,000 VMware employees. I had a gay man who was coming to a certain meeting, and it was sort of a coming out meeting of our diversity and inclusion groups. He didn't sleep for almost a week because he was so nervous to present to me because of my Christian conservative values in the workplace. And I find out about this, right, this guy, and I apologize to the whole company. I says, if any of you are uncomfortable to be your whole self, right, in it, that's my problem. That I've created a company that doesn't allow you, to do that. And I began a reverse mentoring relationship with him, right? It was super powerful, for me, right? You have to be willing to say when you were wrong. You have to be willing to own, right? In the workplace as a leader, right? Remember, you have no success, you have all the failures, and your team has all the success, right? And you pour it onto them for it. And you demonstrate values, you talk about things. I mean, many times I would talk about, the values of Intel or VMware. It's like I'm giving a sermon without scripture references, right? Because so many of values, truth, integrity, helping those in need, having a workplace that allows you to bring your whole self to the workplace. Man, it sounds like scripture. Right? Really, our values truly are, the foundations, for human relationships. And in that, that's a lot of humility to go do that. And the firmer and clearer you are in your own skills and strength and, confidence in your own skin, the more humble that you can be to everyone else that you're working with.
All right. Thank you. Very good. Money you mentioned, and we do want to talk about that. So Intel's been kind to you. And you are renowned as a generous person. That's actually how I first heard about you, not other parts of your faith, but your generosity. I've heard that you practice something that some call a progressive tithe. Would you talk about how you think about wealth and generosity and stewardship?
Yeah. So give a little bit of the story. There was this guy, his name was Wayne Bigelow. He was given some conference.
That's a great name.
Yeah. Is it though? Yeah. And we'll come back to Wayne in a second. But he described, and Linda and I were, just married, just starting our family. And he challenged everybody there that day to give an increasing percentage of your gross income to charity, philanthropy, to God's work every year. Linda and I looked at each other and we said, okay, let's do it. We had already started, committed to a tithe at 10%. So we said every year, next year it's going to be 11 and then 12. And that was 40 years ago. So now we're giving over half of our gross income every year to philanthropy, right at that point. And, 10% of nothing. And now it's 50% plus of a lot, right? And that's just been our commitment our whole life long. So, a progressive tithe, a progressive, philanthropic. And I'll tell you, when you start doing that early in life, when you start investing in things, it just becomes this extraordinary blessing. I mean, I am super excited about technology. You want to hear me get passionate? Okay, let's talk about how AI is going to touch the future, et cetera. But if you want to see me get really excited, let me tell you about our philanthropies. One of those, we started working with some schools in Africa that a friend, right, was a missionary to. There were less than 200 kids in those schools. Linda and I started working with about 30 years ago. There are 32,000 kids now in our schools. 32,000 kids in the poverty, stricken areas of Kenya and Ethiopia who are now, and one of them became a Stanford grad, right, who came out of one of the slums. We have an Oxford visiting scholar from one of those slum kids. And literally the Stanford grad, he was raised by an uncle. Both of his parents died of AIDS. And he started in the program, won an international scholarship, and graduated a year ago, right, from the business department here at Stanford, right? You talk about transforming lives, 32,000 of them. We started a church planting organization in the U.S. called Stadia. This year they'll plant 100.
You guys did Stadia?
Yeah. Yeah. We helped start Stadia.
Yeah.
And this year they'll plant about 170 churches.
Yeah.
Right. In America, we started TBC, Transforming the Bay with Christ, that we started here for, transforming the literally the spiritual face of the Bay Area. My wife Linda's on the board of Missions of Hope, the one in Africa. So, I just say, and you start that little and you stay faithful to it. You give not just of your wealth, right, but of your network, of your time, of your passions and your skills. 10, 20, 30 years later, it's just phenomenal, the things that you can impact. And I could keep going. We have about 10 major philanthropies that we support. Mercy Ships, the largest floating hospital. They're in Sierra Leone right now. Linda went to visit them this last year. Super successful. We helped to move William Jessup University up to the Sacramento area. I was on the board of that for a number of years. We do the Luis Palau Association, city gospel movements across the nation. So all of these have been ministries that we've been investing in now for many decades. And each one of you should do exactly that same thing. And just start, be faithful. And as your career and wealth, just invest more and more over time. And those will be the greatest joys of your life.
Beautiful. Thank you. There's a world of need. How do you choose what you're going to personally give to?
Yeah. And there's so many things to give to that you have, and there really is overwhelming need around you. And part of it is, our philosophy has been, we only give to Christian charities, right? Things that have decidedly Christian values, leadership, et cetera. We only give to things where we personally know the leadership of that ministry, because we're not going to be just together. We will know, right, what they're working on, who they are. We'll develop relationships with them, and we invest very specifically to accomplish things. Like I mentioned, Mercy Ships, we built the radiology department on the boat, right? You can go to the boat and you can see our radiology department on the boat, right? That you have. And, like with Stadia, right? Okay. We set specific goals for our gifts for them. It's like, MBOs, right? Management by objectives. Some of the charities just hate us. We hold them so accountable, right? For what they do. The one in Africa, we just built the camp for the kids. A couple of years ago, we had put computer labs in every one of the 34 schools. And, I have lots of rich friends. So I got Michael Dell, right, to commit all of the computers. I know the CTO of Safaricom, so I got him to commit, all of the networking to it as well. So I'm an unabashed fundraiser as well, right? Because if I'm passionate about something, what an opportunity I'm giving you to join in my passions, right? For something that truly is world changing. So, it's become, really something that we're just, over and over again, it just blesses you in incredible ways.
Wonderful. So we're going to open up to questions from the audience now. We have probably about 20 minutes for questions before we go back to worship at the end of the service. So please don't be shy. Speak up, ask your question. Again, it is for questions, not for miniature speeches. And I will paraphrase your question back to him so it's available to those online with us. Who has a question for? Yes.
So you mentioned some characters in the Bible. I remember back when we used to have a lot of conversations about science and faith. People would talk about Christians like Kessler and Isaac Newton, like these amazing scientists who were Christian. And we have the examples of the Bible of these really powerful people. Why did it seem like Christians are not nearly as impressive today? Why is that?
So in history and in the Bible, you have these Christians rising amazing levels of power and influence, and now not so much. What's up?
Yeah, well,
That's it.
so let me, if you want to be a Nobel Prize winner, the best thing you could do is become a person of faith, right? Approximately 85% of all Nobel Prize winners consider faith to be important or essential to who they are. So I'll say, and that continues to this day, right? And some of those are across the different domains. So I do think there is this view that science and Christianity or faith are in conflict. But actually, when you look to the highest echelons, most people end up being of faith, right? At the end of the day. And, today, what's the rage? AI research. What is AI? It's mimicking the neural pathways of the brain and creating computer models that look similar to what the brain is. Who created the brain? My God did, right? We're still just like infant in understanding AI systems because there's so many things, that the cortex and the brain do that our AI systems don't do yet. And we don't even understand how the brain works, much less creating AI systems that do it. We're so far from fully mining, God's creative capacity. And I do think that, it hasn't been, it isn't just now in history. There have been different episodes of history or epochs of history where, it says, there is no Christians around but me. Right. And, if you look at the early days of in UK, for instance, there were no Christians left. Right. And out of that came people like Wilberforce and others that rose up, powerfully. And we saw that, over and over again through history, where you go through these periods and cycles. And hey, I'm looking to a field of great Stanford students here. Rise up to become not only the best in your field, but representing Christ, right, as you do the great work that's going to come in your futures.
Very good. I saw a question over here as well, Walter. How does your ability and constraints trying to honor Christ in your career change as you go through the different levels of leadership?
Yeah, and clearly, as you're at different levels in the workplace, some things become hard and some other things become easy, right? And for instance, as a CEO, hey, HR works for me. It's like, come on in here, let's chat, right? And so on. But, also some of those, you become way more accountable. So let me tell you a fun little story, right, for it. I'm meeting with one of my board members of VMware, right? This is, 8 years ago, something like that. And I'm meeting with this board member. And in the middle of lunch, he just says, we weren't sure about you. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he says, that faith stuff. And I'm like, really? And he says, yeah. He says, you becoming a CEO of a liberal software Bay Area company, we weren't sure about you. And I'm like, really? At this point, I'm like jumping out of my chair, right? Right. I had lunch with him and I said, really? And he says, yeah, we debated that more than anything else, before we called you to be the CEO of VMware. And I'm like, really? I'm really, this is so mind boggling, right, to me. And then he says, yeah, but it worked out okay. Just goes on to the next thing, and two things that, from that little episode. One is God had gone before me, right? I wasn't in the boardroom. I didn't know that debate was going on, right? For it. And at VMware, I was voted #1 CEO in America 2 years in a row on Glassdoor as that liberal, conservative, Christian CEO that would never fit into Silicon Valley, right? And I'll just say, as you're going through it, you want to have good mentors because there's different challenges each step along the way. You want to be gentle as doves, but wise as serpents. Many people derail as Christians in the workplace because you're not wise. You create opportunities for conflict. You do things that you think at the time you're honoring God, but you're just being stupid. Right. And you really need to be wise about how to represent yourself at different levels, where you want to, really be visible and where you want to be, much more careful. Right. Because, there's evil in the world. There are people that hate you. It was funny. I was with a guy, and this is probably 5 years ago. He comes up to me and he says, Pat, I have to seek your forgiveness. I'm like, why? And he says, well, I hated you as a Christian in the workplace. And I'm like, really? Right. And I knew this guy didn't like me, but you have other people that don't like you and it's a competitive environment. You're doing this stuff. And I'm like, really? And he says, yeah, man, I would do anything I could to undermine you in the workplace because of your faith. I'm like, really? Right. And, and I'm just like, in this, right. It's like, and he says, yeah. Right. He says, and then I became a Christian and now I have to come and seek your forgiveness, right? Sometimes it'll be motivated by evil. Sometimes it'll be policies of HR. Sometimes it's just healthy competition, right? Like Daniel, okay, let's throw him under the bus, send him to the lion's den, right? That you go on those things. So, have good mentors, be wise on the journey, be true to who you are every step on the way. And, right, remember, what does it say? For everyone who loves God, you will be persecuted. You will have those challenging days. And those challenging days are not all bad. Many times God's allowing those things to come into your life to test and grow you.
All right. Yes, Elaine. So, what do you do besides the obvious things, I guess, to be a witness at work?
Yeah. Well, so a few other thoughts on this. Just one is, what are the things you're going to be recognized for in the workplace, right? And there's obviously lots of other things you can do. And one of the easiest things as a Christian is to be a great relational partner to other people, right? And if I had, in my early years, I was known as a prima donna. I know this is hard to believe, right?
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you worked for me, you loved me. If you worked in another department, you hated me, right? I just wasn't a good peer, right? To people. And, you just want to be, how do you be a good partner in the workplace? How do you distinguish yourself in the workplace? How do you, go to other groups and really, I'll say be beneficial? There's often many things like employee resource groups and other things like that you can be a leader in that are safe places, right? To be visible for your faith. Also, as I said, may I pray for you? How do you become, known as a peacemaker in the workplace, as somebody who people are drawn to, that you have a winsomeness, to your faith that people say, oh, I want to hang out with her, right? In that regard. Also, one of the other rules I would say, not everybody is comfortable with you talking about your faith in the workplace. And a simple rule is if they go to the personal level, so can you. And if they don't, you don't, right? And if they're, talking about, what they did on Saturday night, okay, hey, we had a great church service on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. But, right as well. But if it's making them uncomfortable, don't do it, right? Find other ways, right, to represent Christ to them. And, every once in a while, you're going to, hit one of those very nasty situations like I was, describing. It's going to be hard. It's going to be terrible. You think your life is ending, and just be faithful. Continue to be a great employee as you get through those, and you'll be a better person when you get to the other side.
Very good. I think I have a blind spot over here. Has anyone raised their hand over here, sort of in my... All right, moving this way. Yes, you. So things have changed since your day. HR departments are increasingly strict and they want no controversy. And so when you are the entry-level employee, how would you counsel someone to navigate that nowadays?
Yeah. So one thing is your premise is wrong, right? There's, most workplaces now include some form of ERGs, right? Employee resource groups that are safe places for people to be, Native Indians or, to be, from Asia Pacific or to, be LGBTQ or whatever it is. Almost all of those ERGs include faith, right, as part of them. I helped to create one of the first ERGs, I think, on the planet. I helped create the Intel Christian Bible Network, right, at the time. So most companies, and Google has them, Cisco has them, Facebook has them as well, ERG. So you actually have a safe place to go now in most workplaces, to meet about faith, to have Bible studies, to come together as a group. So actually, your premise is wrong. Most companies actually are better at supporting this. Last year at the World Economic Forum, it was funny. I'm being interviewed by Klaus Schwab, starter of the the guy who started the World Economic Forum, and Jamie Dimon are on it. And we got on the ERG topic, and Jamie says, we have no faith ERGs. And I said, we have all faith ERGs, right? And he and I got into a public debate at the World Economic Forum last year on this. And actually, JP Morgan, right? They're one of the few companies that don't have faith ERGs. Almost all the other, top 500 companies do now. Now, that said, right, again, right, that doesn't mean that, it's easy to be faithful in the workplace and visible for your faith. And as I said, on these kind of things, right, you just want to be super wise as you're going through, right, the different phases of your career progression about your faith. But also most companies say, hey, we want your whole self to show up in the workplace. And whole self, about 3/4 of humanity considers faith one of their top 3 most important things, right? Is there say, hey, if the most important things aren't part of what I can bring into the workplace, how can I be the whole self here, right? You have a very legitimate place to say that I want to be able to have a faith expression in the workplace of some sort, whatever that may be. And again, it's not necessarily easy in those settings, but as you come forward, there is great evidence for this. Bring your whole self in the workplace. There's good ERG policies for it, and some of these things are just spectacular. One of the 5th largest church in America, today is Christ Church in the Valley in Phoenix, Arizona. I think they're number 5. The pastor of that, Ashley Woodridge, he was in an Intel Christian Bible Network event that I was speaking at. The day that he was in that event, he and his wife decided to go into full-time ministry. And today he's pastoring the 5th largest church in America. I didn't even know it until he was interviewing me on stage at his church and he told me this story, right? It says, be faithful. And some days you're going to, get beat up for it. And other days you're going to have glorious moments because you're God honoring in the workplace.
Not to brag, but we're like the 5th largest campus ministry at Stanford. Yes, right over here. I'm not sure I understood your question. Okay. What are you ambitious for in the world beyond your direct work? Like, what do you want to see happen?
So the mission statement that I wrote for myself, and this is 35 years ago, I wrote, that I want to work on a piece of technology that touches every human on the planet in every modality of life to improve their quality of life and hastens Christ's return.
Say that again. There's a lot in there.
Yeah. That I want to work on a piece of technology that touches every person on earth in every modality of life to improve their quality of life and hasten Christ's return. Okay, so that's what I wrote like 35 years ago. How many of you have ever used Wi-Fi? Okay, I helped create it, right? And today about...
Whoa. That is the biggest flex I have heard at Stanford. I've been here 2 decades. What? Okay, keep going.
Yeah, okay. I helped to create USB, right? When my granddaughter plugs USB stick into the computer, she says, "Thank you, Pop." Right? Right. Okay. Hey, we have Thunderbolt now. So anyway, don't worry about it. Or USB-C. So anyway, but I mean, the things that we get to do as technologists, first thing, are just like so cool, right? I helped to create the foundations of cloud infrastructure, right? I had 14 generations of microprocessors, things like USB and Wi-Fi and, some of the other standards that I've worked on. This is like so cool. And literally, before I die, I think, we'll hit 90% of humanity is connected. And I will have worked on technologies that touch them. That's pretty freaking cool, right? And that we're going to improve their quality of life, right? We're lifting people out of poverty. We're bringing, more and more of humanity forward through the power of technology, right? And through that, I believe I get to touch lives for eternity, right? At a scale that, is simply awesome when you think about it. And I do believe that that will influence eternity, not just for individuals, but to hasten Christ's return. That's what gets me excited about the power of what we get to do. Hey, right, there's a lot of things that you can do in life, but to think that I can truly touch every human on the planet, that's what we get to do as technologists. It is that exciting. And I do think that through that, and just one more. Now, this is just a little bit theological. Why did Christ come when he came? The Pax Romana and the Roman roads, the message could go out. What was the greatest technological innovation, right, of the mid, period of the last millennia? The printing press, right? What did Luther do with it, right? He created the Reformation and the Renaissance, right? Technology, right? And today, the internet, we're connecting more of humanity than ever before. AI is going to be transforming, healthcare and social and life and financial. That's what we get to participate in. We live in the greatest period of humanity, and we get to do it through as technologists. And if we truly embrace our Christian heritage, the greatest periods of Christian progress have been when we've embraced technology fully and completely. Right now, one of the companies I'm involved with, Glue, we're going to create kingdom-aligned large language models, right? Because we're going to make sure that large language models include
Chat God.
Hey, it's a competitor to Chat GPT, right? It really is, to say, is it moral? Is it just? Is it right? Right? Does it give a proper view of God and eternity? And that's what CALM is, kingdom-aligned large language models. You can go look it up and read it, because what we put into our large language models are going to influence so many areas, right, that are built on those AI systems. I want to make sure they're done open and trusted, that's what all of our systems are building on in the future. That's what we get to influence. Isn't this like so cool? Yeah. And we're going to do it to touch every person on earth and make their lives better and hasten Christ's return.
I saw Tom's hand back over there. How will technology hasten the return of Christ?
The more people that get to, there are different views of, when's Christ coming back? Do you know? No, I don't.
It's the right answer. I approve.
Yeah, theologically you're right. Right. But to me, the opportunity, right, what's the Great Commission, right? That, every person will hear, right? What's the Lord's Prayer say, right? That your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? That we could each be bringing a bit of heaven every day to this earth. And, I think that if we use technology, to reach every person on earth, my theology is, hey, that is hastening Christ's return. That is hastening the presence of kingdom on earth. And, that's what I want to be part of.
All right. I think we have time for one more question before we go to closing worship. Oh my gosh. Josue.
Like, as the undergrad, as you're going through your career, you're a busy person. So, what did you do to not neglect your LinkedIn, not again?
Boom.
So you clearly have been a busy man. How do you maintain spiritually vibrant life with fulfilling all your obligations?
So you can go look up, I wrote a book called The Juggling Act, right? Balancing faith, family, and work. And when I was doing my undergrad and then my graduate work, I was working full-time at Intel, right? So, I was,
Even in your undergrad.
yeah, even in my undergrad, I was working full time. I started at Intel at 18 years old. Intel paid for my tuition. So I got full tuition reimbursement as long as I got a B or better. I was always living in fear that I wouldn't get a B or better. I did okay.
Same here.
So I was working full time. I was going to school full time. My wife, what became my wife, Linda, she had endometriosis, and the doctor said kids now or never. So we started a family, right? So in my senior year at Santa Clara, we delivered our first baby 2 months later. So for all of my graduate work here at Stanford, right, we're raising kids. So, full-time faith, right, full-time family, full-time job, full-time school. What do you think? Pretty nutty, right? Period of time. And out of that came what, became the juggling act, balancing faith, family, and work. And, what your job is, right? Put God on the throne every morning, right? Start just saying, and sometimes he may not stay there till 8:02, but that's okay. You put him back on the throne every day, right? Be in devotion, be in church, be faithful. Family, right? Hey, it's going to be hard, right? Particularly, working full time, going to school, full time, but I dated my kids, took them to breakfast regularly, dated my wife. As we went through it, we had what we called the at-home chart, right? Which was we would keep score, right? On being at home, right? If I was home by 6 o'clock, I got 1 point. If I was home by 5 o'clock, I got 2 points. If I was home after 6, I got 0 points. If I was gone on weekends, I got negative points.
MBO, marriage by objective.
Yeah, very much so. And my secretary produced the chart for Linda and I, so an independent arbiter, right? Associated with it, right? And we kept score, right, for literally years, right? Associated with it, because work is demanding, school is demanding. But are you going to have a vibrant faith and a vibrant family when you get through it all? Anyway, so you can go read the Juggling Act, and right, I was just asked this week if I was going to put it on audiobooks, and I guess I probably will now that I was asked. But yeah, and it talks about some of the other techniques that we use to keep things in balance. But if you're going to be successful in the workplace, if you're going to be successful in family, and you're going to be successful in faith, you have to be very disciplined about how you do all of those things, because it's super hard. And if you're not disciplined about it, at the end of the day, hey, you'll be a workaholic and you have no family, and eventually you lose your career as well.
Pat, thank you so much. There were many more questions than we had time to get to. Are you going to be around after the meeting at all? All right. So I encourage you to stay. So the way we do things at Chaos, we open with a little bit of worship, and then we close with worship. The worship at the end is longer than the worship at the beginning. If you have to slip out, we understand. You are welcome to stay. Whether you share our faith or not, you're always welcome to be part of our community. If you would like to slip out, there's literature in the back that you can take if you have questions about Christianity. If you want to sign up for our email list, you can do that in the back as well. No pressure, just invitation. And we invite you all to take the time that we are going into worship and use an opportunity for prayer. And if you would like, there will be people in the back to pray with you about any specific needs you have. You got a midterm that's stressing you out, you got drama at home. You just feel convicted that this man got married and had kids and got a degree with a full-time job, and you're just struggling to finish your P sets. And he invented Wi-Fi and USB too. Seriously, Pat, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it so much. Worship team, come back up.